Welcome to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that looks at various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. Today's guest, set decorator Jude Farr, joins us to talk about her work on Last Night in Soho. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode, so make yourself comfortable as we jump into the conversation with Jude. Good evening, Jude. Thanks for joining me today.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for getting back to me and everything. I do probably mention this a lot to all my guests, saying that I'm chuffed that I've got them on. I feel like I just overuse the phrase of being very appreciative that people give up their time to come talk to me about projects.
Oh, well, it's always good to talk to people who are interested and not just people going, oh, what famous people did you meet this week?
Exactly. And then sometimes you might not even bump into anybody on a job.
No, absolutely.
And even in case you were saying you're working on something, it's like, oh, who's famous in it? Is there anybody I've heard of?
Yeah. No,
like,
not in this one. No, not in this one.
No, I don't think so. I think there's a young up-and-comer called Terence Stamp, but I'm not sure if anybody's heard of him.
Yeah, somebody, yeah.
But where I want to sort of start off is, like, as a set decorator, you work closely with a production designer who's the creator of the world, but then you bring whatever they've drawn on paper to life with the set decorating and getting all the props together. When you first join a project, what does your pre-production look like? And from an aesthetic perspective, what research do you undertake prior to establishing any design choices?
Obviously, the first thing is the script. And then as soon as I've read the script, I will obviously talk to the director in between and the designer, and he will have had conversations, or she will have had conversations with the director. Then my immediate thing, look, this is my office. I've just got a whole wall of books here. Masses of years and years of collecting before the internet, where, they were your only reference. So, but obviously now I can go onto the internet and pretty much find anything, which is still great. And I will start collecting pictures. Even if they're nothing to do with what the film's about, I'll still start collecting pictures and putting them together, putting them in files and things, and then sort of wheedling the ones out that I might go, oh, I don't like that anymore, put that away. And then obviously talking about colours and the style, how it's going to be filmed, obviously DOPs and people get involved, and just basically starting from there. I don't like anyone else doing my research for me. I like to do it myself because I think it goes in, it's much quicker and easier. So I prefer to do it myself, and collating it again, do it myself. I prefer to do that because I think then I'm understanding what I've been listening to. There's a lot of listening, and then I can understand it a lot more than if somebody else was doing it.
I guess you get that information firsthand, right? When you get the discussions with various departments, and I guess in your mind, you have the image, but now you want to get the
style.
Style, and grab the sort of different reference points. And I guess it's easier than trying to explain to someone, because I guess it's the same with when I'm just thinking of questions to ask, or when you're trying to play things out. That third-hand information will just get lost in someone, and then it just creates double the amount of work.
Yeah, and I think if you've got a picture and you show it to somebody and they go, well, I like that, but I don't like that lighting, or I like the colours in that, but I don't like the style of it. So you've always got that. And also, remember, we are creating people's characters as well. So, sometimes in the script, you don't know much about that person, but you're building their house, which is also, interest. I found that fascinating, and I love to know hobbies and the whole wheedly getting information about, and then something you say to maybe a writer or somebody, oh, well, what books would they read? And they go, well, I don't know, she probably hasn't got any books. Well, what does she what's she got in that bag that she's carrying around all the time? You know, it's all those sort of things that it's just interesting to start layering it all up right from the very beginning.
It's actually funny you mentioned about that you build people's characters, because in my notes later on, actually, I might as well just jump into that question now that you've mentioned it.
Yeah.
Because your role is not just bringing the world to life, but you do, as you say, bringing characters to life,
Yeah.
like possessions. I think there's certain, especially with the character Ellie, you see the records, the record player, the alarm clock, even the can of Coke with her name on it, which is it's quite funny to see.
A lot of things. We went through a lot of bags. We went through a lot of record players until the right one. Edgar had the right one. He didn't know which one he wanted until he knew he didn't want that one. And then he okayed a record player, and we got something like 4 or 5 of those old. And I think we did them in a blue. We had them all redone and found somebody up north who renovates things, and we did all of that. And then they decided they didn't want blue ones, and we'd already got 5 of them already being made. I think it was red in the end, and I think and we had to then get the blue ones to be red. So, but you know, that's just how it is. You know, we knew it was the right record player, but it was just then it was how he'd got it in his head for it to be that special prop. The records, we had hundreds of those records, literally hundreds, and we went through them. It was brilliant buying them, because you'd go, right, there's one that's £79, but there's one that's 15. Well, we're not playing it, so it doesn't really matter, so we'll go for the £15 one.
Did you ever pick records on the basis of like, I might actually keep this afterwards. Might be something
I didn't, no, because a lot of that music, I've actually got a lot of that music we have on DVD, you know, CDs and things at home. I mean, I haven't got any streaming stuff. I'm terrible. I don't do any of that stuff. But you know, a lot of that music from the 60s we've actually got at home anyway. So some of the things are fantastic. You know, just buying all the magazines and things that were in Miss Collins's house, and it was funny what after we finished, we were going through a lot of the old Vogues and things that we bought that were up in attics and stuff down sides of cupboards and things, and I found a Vogue with Diana Rigg on the front from the 60s that we'd obviously bought and I hadn't noticed. So I took that and I gave it to the production to give to Edgar, because he'd all finished then, so they'd gone off to start editing. So yeah, there's sometimes you go, oh, I'd like that. That's a nice thing, but not so much on this. I think it was very much how it had to be. It wasn't I don't think there was much personal stuff in any of those sets. For me, I would say it was very much the characters it was being led by.
Do you ever find as well, when you're creating these props and sourcing them, do you ever sprinkle like part of your character into it as well, like your favorite book or maybe a record that you used to like?
Sometimes I do. Yeah, sometimes there's something, and I won't do it on purpose. I'll do it if I find something. If I'm looking for a load of books and then I see, you know, oh, that's like I've got Charlie and the Chocolate Factory here, an original paperback. And if I found that and it was about a kid, then I probably would have put it in, but not deliberately. I'm actually sort of fairly sensible about how it goes.
When you are dressing these sets, do you want to be as faithful as you can to the era, or do you like to put your spin on the decade? Because
sorry.
Because they talk about 60s rather than mention a specific date as well, which kind of makes it easier, because you have a 10 years to choose from design wise, but then harder to sort of, if it kind of jumps back and forth and nailing it.
Yeah, and say, oh, right, these are the cars that in this time, or this is how short the miniskirts are, or this is how the shoes are, because things like that do change really rapidly. So yeah, it in the end, you just go, okay, it's what somebody understands as being the 60s. I think. And also when you're doing the 60s, you always have to look back a decade or probably two from the 60s, because you're going then into the Second World War, and people didn't have any much money, and houses were still furnished in, you know, old things. So, you know, a lot of those Soho streets were, I mean, even I remember them being pretty derelict and pretty rubbish when I was a kid. So, you know, so there's always that thing of history, and just sort of, you know, just letting it go a bit and not being too precise. I think it's artistic license.
You mentioned artistic license and stuff. I think as well, you can use image of part of Soho, but I guess you could always, when you're creating it, touch it up to make it a little bit more cooler. Not cooler, but as in tidying up. So if there's like a little something like, not kink, but, you know, if certain brickwork was wrong, or, you know, there's like a bit of like that's been that,
paint colors, and if there weren't any canopies, and there were definitely canopies, and also things like, I mean, you won't have even noticed half of the things we did in some of those shops. You know, I mean, you know, where she goes and buys her dress, we made a big thing about that shop. It was the same shop she'd gone into in modern times. So it was a retro hippie 60s shop, and then it was the same shop in the 60s. So when, you know, it was interesting, because there was a lot of that, a lot of, you know, the bedroom in the flat, you know, we had walls taken out. A lot of it was really complicated about who were you seeing in the mirror at that point, and were you seeing a reflection of that person, or were you seeing that person? And it was really complicated. It took all of us, you know, time to work out how it was going to, and whose bed dressing was on the bed, and which bed was it her bed, or was it her bed? And, you know, that whole, was it her lights or was it her lights? So it was tricky. It was a tricky film to do.
Yeah, because if you look at somebody like Ellie's room, predominantly used a lot in both periods, you know, there were obviously changes that needed, but did it feel weird that you're creating two versions of the same set?
It really did. It was really weird, because it was absolutely, how far do you change it? You don't want to change it too far, because then people won't realize it's the same room. So you've got the wallpaper, you've got the bed, you've got flooring, you've got, so her things are in there and they're not in, you know. So it was very tricky. And as I say, at one point they took the wall out and we built a complete and opposite. So it was a reflection, but the reflection in the other, you know, so you got the modern one and then the period one. So, but we had to do it exactly like a reflection. So it was back to front, through the wall with mirrors. It's just like completely confusing.
Because there's also there's a scene later on where it kind of transitions from her going through the closet as well. And I guess that's more to do with production design of how the layout of the set will be. But even going through one scene, one like set to another, is that difficult for you to sort of create and build? Because you have to take in consideration the stunt of somebody kind of being pulled through the closet.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that Marcus took on as his, and then he would explain to us how we were going to do it. And then sometimes we didn't know how we were going to do it. You know, it was like, somebody would say, oh yeah, but you need those lights. They have to be, because it's a reflection and she's going through, you'd need those lights. And then someone else would say, no, you don't, because she'd have the lights that were in that set. So, you know, you were always questioning how it was going to happen. But Marcus was more on it, I think, than I was. I would stand there sometimes and go, what are we doing today?
Well, I guess it does come down to production design, but I think it was more, I guess, the attention to detail that is needed from, okay, so it's 60s here and then back to present day. Yeah. But as well, when you're working on a script where it does jump quite back and forth between 60s and seventh day, like, did you find that difficult to sort of, in terms of schedule wise, that you'd be one day in a period drama and then one day you'd kind of just be in modern day?
Yeah. And some days we would be in both 2 or 3 times. So you'd be, I think there was a good deal of prep, so we did have enough time to work it out, and it was just making sure that everybody was really on it. It's Tom, who's one of our prop makers, became very involved in all the floorboard bits and the walls and the doors where the shadow men were, and he became very involved in all the mattress scenes and things like that. Things that just would have just confused me. I think you needed a certain type of brain, to be able to work a lot of those things out, because they were extremely complicated.
But especially when you have, as you said, stuff being mapped out, I guess it's like a like a rat maze that you see where you're like, okay, you go there, put this here, put this there.
We should have done that, actually. It would have probably been really handy. I mean, obviously we had storyboards and things, but yeah, that would have been actually really good. So you actually had a physical visual map rather than a story map. It would have been actually really clever to have done that, and we could have gone right from here. It then goes into that bit and then that bit.
Yeah, that could have been like the like departmental gift of like, here is our map.
Yeah.
Can you
up on the wall?
Yeah, can you crack the Last Night in Soho maze?
The code. Yeah.
And see what's behind it and everything. My favorite set is the first time Ellie goes into the 60s. So when you kind of go down that narrow sort of alleyway, and then it just reveals the big James Bond poster, the lights, the glamorous, and it's the shots in the trailer itself. And I guess, as they call it, that's the money shot. But then also you follow her into Café de Paris, and that's just looks exquisite.
Yeah, it was a great set to do that. It was huge as well. It was the size that you saw it. It was enormous. And it took us days and days to, all the banquet. I don't think you really noticed all the banquet seating, all the chairs, the bars, the amount of, I think we cleared out pretty much most of the hire companies with chandeliers. We had pretty much every chandelier that you could hire. Red carpet. We probably bought most of the UK's red carpet supply for that as well. So and that big scene, the James Bond poster, that was in the Haymarket. So we filmed that actually in the Haymarket. So basically that got closed to traffic, on and off during the evening of the filming. And then we made the entrance actually into the cinema. So the real cinema sort of was on one side, and then we sort of made a fake cinema, a fake door on the other side for the Café de Paris. But it did look good, didn't it? And that whole the music, the staircase, it just, I loved that bit as well. I think that was really good.
Yeah, because I think you just look at it, and I think that really cements the sort of world that you're being pulled into.
Yeah,
that it's not, because it feels like the modern day Soho feels a bit grimy and not like slight character. And then I guess that sort of love letter of Soho, of being like, but this cool place was a cool, vibrant, the place to be if you wanted to be
in there.
That sort of like, I guess, Cray-esque person going there, because and then the little nod as well with Cilla Black performing.
I know. Great,
it's just fun as well. And then even when you're looking at something, the Café de Paris inside, the attention to detail that must go into it with not just the chandeliers, but the tables and the glasses that you have to use.
Absolutely.
I guess eagled eyes people will probably like slow-mo that scene and be like, those glasses look like the sort of ones made in 1977. What are they playing at?
And the bottles and the labels on the wine bottles and the champagne bottles and everything. Sophie does all the graphics and things. It was like crazy mad. All the neon signs and things that we had to have made as well. It was like bar menus and table menus. The whole thing is just, it's a conglomerate of everybody's eyes, everybody's talent. You can't do it without other good people with you. It just doesn't work. You need a good team, definitely.
You're mentioning the barmen as well, that they will have to open and produce and make drinks a certain way.
Yeah.
So if you had, I guess, a bottle, I think it's the most simplest thing I can think of is probably a bottle opener, but you'll need a certain type of bottle opener.
Yes.
Is that something you also have to look at how
Oh,
to
yes.
use and
I
be
would.
and teach
Yeah,
them?
definitely. I wouldn't teach them. I would say to the ADs, look, he's making cocktails in this scene. If he was making cocktails, here's the stuff. And if it was a really very specific thing of somebody doing cocktails, then I would probably have suggested they get somebody in to help. If it's just about pouring glasses of things, then obviously I just make sure all the bits are there, make sure they know where they are, and hopefully they know how to use them.
Just that hopefully like no bad accidents, no loss or damage forms needed because somebody dropped the cocktail shaker and then it cracked or something. But as well, with it being a period drama, what was like the hardest props to source? And were there anything where you were just on the verge of giving up and then it just appeared when looking for them?
I don't think so. Oh, I know what we did. We had a big drama with the what are they called? Those things that you slide all the pictures in and out. There used to be in libraries.
With the newspapers where she's going through everything.
What's it called?
They're not a projector, but
no,
do you know what? I'm going to cheat this and Google it quickly.
Oh, go on then, Google it.
It's like a newspaper projector.
It's the old style of gathering information on small amounts of plastic, isn't it? I can't think what it's called. And I've got one on the set on this film as well. You wouldn't believe it. And
somebody said it's a microfiche reader.
That's it, microfiche. That's it, microfiche. Microfiche. They had them when I was at school. We had them, so it was something I understood, but I certainly didn't understand it when we were trying to make the bloody microfiche. And in the end, we got somebody in who actually was a sort of an expert at that. Just getting the right microfiche, getting it to do what Edgar wanted it to do, which wasn't what the machine wanted to do itself. So we did have to do a lot of changing, and so that probably was the pain in the proverbial on the set. I think I can't think anything else was really that much of a problem, but that was a real pain to get and to make it do what he wanted it to do rather than what it wanted to do.
Well, I guess as well when you have an idea of how in films how it works, but then I guess you've got it purposely built, or it's one of the last of its kind because they are obsolete in libraries.
Do you know what? The funny thing is, we found out they're not obsolete. And all the Secret Service and all the government keep all their really important information on them now because they don't destruct. They don't go off into the ether and disappear or wear out or anything. They are, even though they're old-fashioned and they are a funny old physical thing to do, they are all used now with which is interesting, very interesting.
So basically they're like record players. They went out of fashion and now they're coming back, so
Absolutely.
Watch out for a library near you.
Exactly. They're quite clunky.
They are clunky. They're not exactly something you'd be able to put in your backpack, but
no, you wouldn't.
They are just something that's more for
unless you're James Bond and you can make it really small.
Well, then it'll be like a self-destruct one or something.
Yeah, probably would. Yeah.
but when you're also dressing the sets, do you put any fun little Easter eggs on the set, or
Not
do you?
Really. No,
do you have to add stuff in that might foreshadow events in the film?
Oh, on this we did actually. Edgar asked us to put a lot of China ladies, dancing ladies in. I don't know if you saw them. I can't even remember. Those horrible sort of Victorian dancing ladies made of china with horrible little dresses and skirts. We put them in into Miss Collins's set. And I'm assuming it was a nod to her when she was younger, as being a beauty with her dresses and her elegant dancing. That was one thing that we did put in, but that was at his request. They're ugly. They're not the prettiest things, but I do understand why he wanted them.
Okay. Do you find as well that when you're working with certain directors and their vision, that you because it is a very collaborative process making a film. Do you ever find that they give you like a list of things that they would want you to find? So, for example, like the Victorian dancer dolls,
Yeah.
or is it a case of you have your research book and then you go out and find what you can?
Yeah, and I think also it's quite an instinctive thing. Once you know what you're doing and you've got his vision, you know what's going to be right on a set. I mean, you know what feels good and if it fits into a space as well. I mean, those dancing dolls came in quite late. Those dancing ornaments, not dolls, they came in quite late. They weren't on the set to start with. And then he said, you know what I really like is some of those. And then we ended up having to make a couple because he wanted them to burn in the fire as well. So, but I'm not sure if you ever saw them. But I just like to put things that feel right onto a set. And I think you have a sense of what does feel right. You know, I did The Last Duel, finished it last year. I actually started it just after I'd done Last Night in Soho, which is or the last day of my life practically, or the last film I ever might do. And I put a table onto that set, and Ridley Scott said to me, that table isn't a medieval table. And I said, no, I know it's not. I said, but it's really nice, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it is. And he kept it. And I think if I'd lied to him and went, oh no, it is a medieval table, it definitely is right, he'd have probably kicked me off the set and the table. But
Do you find that sort of instinct of knowing what's right? That something that just develops through all the projects that you work on, or is it just more down to you personally being like that old age saying of like, if you fail to prepare, then prepare to fail?
yeah,
Is that? I think I've got it right. I'm not sure.
yeah, I think ever since quite a young kid, I used to make dolls' houses out of bits of old cardboard boxes, and I used to dress the dolls, and I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that, and I'd do plays and I'd build the set. So I've always had a great interest in history and things. Going to art college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I did production design, but it was theatre production design because they didn't do film production design except for the National Film School. But I knew I didn't want to be a designer, but I didn't know about this job at that time. And I remember somebody saying to me, oh, you'd be a great social secretary organising parties and things. Well, they didn't have party planners at that point in life, but I think that would have driven me mad because then you've got other people's opinions banging down on you all the time without a script, only their idea. You know, with a script, you've got a base for it. You can't deviate from it too much because it's written and you've got to follow it and you've got to work with it. And I think that you just know if you're interested, you know what will be right. And obviously you do learn as well, because if you've done a 1940s film, you've done it 3 times, you're going to be better prepared every time you do it.
Do you feel as well, because you're doing a period drama, is it important to you as well not to make the scenes look caricaturish?
Oh, definitely. Like I said to you, you don't want to do it as unless it's absolutely like a really hipster, you know, like it was in Rocket Man, completely different to doing this Last Night in Soho, because Rocket Man was a very stylized version of the 70s and 80s. This wasn't. This was a story that was set in the 60s and had a look to it, but it wasn't about the look as much as the story. You see what I mean? Does that make sense?
The look itself is another character to,
yes,
because
yeah.
It is, I think it has been mentioned as a love letter to Soho,
yeah,
in a way, and that I guess with horror films as well, that Soho is that haunted house. So in the haunted house, you're going to see not the words, it's not reflections, but the sort of not animations,
images of things.
like projections of certain
with
things,
other people and other times, and yeah. And I think sometimes films can go wrong when they make too much of the style of the film. I think you can spoil it by making it too much about the design and not about the story. Sometimes you've got to be subtle to make it work. Does that make sense as well?
Yeah. I guess as like in a costume sort of analogy is you're sewing the seam of your design into the film, and it's important that it's not loud, that it doesn't engulf what's happening performance wise.
Yep, absolutely.
But then also with stuff like films like Last Night in Soho, it is the authenticity of it, of being sure that you're going to be in the right place.
Yes.
The authenticity of the look and everything.
Yes.
But I think that's also the great thing. For my final question, do you have a favorite story about Soho that you can share, maybe from when you're sort of growing up or what you've overheard? Because there's always certain, you meet people of various ages who all have a weird story about Soho or just something odd that might have happened to them there. I know I can go first with one that somebody's told me before, whilst you have a think. I was working at one company in the office and somebody was telling me how 20 years ago, so this is probably 80s, maybe 90s, where Friday night in a Soho, you'd always go in some random bar that would take you underneath into their basement, and it'd be like a gambling ring of some sort, and you'd be playing cards for the whole night, and people would be getting drunk and this, that, the other.
That never happened to me. I didn't ever do that. I worked when I first left college for the Arts Council in their bookshop part-time, which was on Longacre, just on the edge of Soho. And I worked in the theatre, and we used to sometimes go out, and you'd find some of the nightclubs and the drinking places, you have to knock on the door. You'd literally knock on the door and somebody would look out and say, who are you with? What do you want? Because you'd had to be with somebody to be able to be let in. And that was when I was working the theatre. By the 80s, I was at the BBC, and it was very much Shepherd's Bush centric. It wasn't, you went into Soho to buy cool things, but it wasn't such. I'm trying to think of what I can tell you about. So I just remember it being a bit grubby. It was always grubby. It was always grubby. But I mean, my tutors at college used to tell me things about Soho when they were younger. I think, if you go back to the 60s and 70s, I think it was a bit more raucous then. I think, you still had the market people coming in and out of Covent Garden early in the morning. You had the film people with all the editing suites and things like that, all coming in and out. And I think I possibly missed the best bit of the, just being a bit too young. But as I say, went to I can't remember, Madam somebody had a place just down off Seven Dials, and I can't think of the name of it, but I do remember having to knock on the door and say I was meeting people there. So
I think that's a quite nice way, because it's like a secret, you end it on the secretive, shadowy world of Soho. Yeah, please let me into to have wet my whistle with my friends. Yeah. I promise you they're there. It's like, oh, we're closed today. Oh. Jude, thank you very much for joining me and talking to me today.
Well, that's been a pleasure, and I hope it's made you a bit more aware of what we've been doing on that job.
You make people aware, and you also appreciate the sort of work that people do to make sure the film looks good. And
people enjoy it, because I think you enjoy it. If you're enjoying it, I think the audience will enjoy it as well.
100%, because it's the infectious positive energy that you're putting into something, and then people will also see the sort of hard work and understanding of what goes into it. And I think that's what the important thing is. And as I said, really, I did enjoy the film. I do enjoy the look. Good. I like the jumping between time periods and being able to sort of see a time period that I would never have seen in my life, because I'm quite young. And it is great to sort of see what, get a taste of it. I'd be interested to see what my dad would think, because he grew up in that time and everything. As I say, my uncle, he used to work in that area, in the West End area. Yeah. So I'd kind of be interested to hear their view on everything.
Yeah, definitely.
But they'll probably be like, I don't remember that being there.
No.
What is this?
Far too glamorous.
Yeah. This is a place that you used to never go to because people would tell you not to go. There's certain areas.
Exactly.
But no, it's great. It's no, it's really fantastic, and I do encourage people to see it and not to be deterred by the rated 18
No,
certificate.
I don't think so either. I think I've definitely seen far worse 18s that deserve to be 18s, where that I don't think did at all. So that's my opinion.
Exactly. Anyway, Jude, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you again. I really appreciate you spending the time to talk to me about Last Night in Soho. For those that are interested, Last Night in Soho is out now in cinemas. Thank you again. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.